Now, at some point, you're going to have to trust the teacher of the experience to go through the experience. Does that make sense? You're not going to go through the experience if you don't really believe the teacher of the experience, right? And that, you know, God in reality, God's only taught one person the experience directly. What I mean by that is, I was taught directly by God what the experience was. The rest of the people who have ever heard God's truth have learnt from me what the experience is. Does that make sense? Yeah.
They've still had to do
even if it's indirectly.
Yeah, but they've still had to do the experiment to have that experience.
Correct.
It's like what you were sharing before about all the stuff you went through with your emotions and learning, and then it's almost like you can now teach everyone the shortcut.
Yep.
You didn't have to just know the five.
I can teach you to have more confidence in just going through the experience. With me, it required many years of doubt and worry, and you know, and what I'm trying to do is alleviate that burden from your life,
so that people can do a refined experiment.
That's right.
Rather than a long-winded one.
Yeah.
You just go, here's the things to experiment with. The same with learning about how to connect with God. You had to go through a whole kind of process, and then you're like, oh, this is the one thing you do. Here you go, you can experiment with that.
That's right. And I can remember a whole heap of things about it as well and things like that.
But you doing the kind of open-ended experiment first to discover the way, then you can just teach the way. Not everyone has to do an open-ended experiment. They just do the single experiment.
That's right. Yeah. Sandra?
It feels to me like I've done everything against the experiment first, as in like what not to do first, all the
often people do.
Emotions, the rebellion, every single thing before I even attempt the experiment.
That's right. Yeah, and it's sad, isn't it, in a way?
Yes, what a waste of life.
Yeah, but in the end, you can see that we have a lot of mistrust of people, and a lot of mistrust of God, and a lot of mistrust of goodness, and a lot of mistrust of love that exists in humanity at the moment. And you can understand why we might take 10 or 15 years to even just do one experiment. But once you've done the experiments properly and you receive the benefit of the result, then you become convinced. And then you can do things much more quickly because you can apply the same principles to every other experiment. Yeah. So for many of you, you've resisted the experiments, and particularly the experiments of receiving God's truth into your heart emotionally, and also allowing God's love to enter you, which is an emotional process. And you resist those experiments, but actually once you have those experiments, you won't want to resist them anymore. Yeah. So the main reason why we resist is because of fears that we have and anger that we have and so forth. So we resist under those circumstances. Brittany?
And also, just as you're talking about the experiments and stuff, I feel like resting in my own assumptions has stopped me as well. Like, I realised that I've just been assuming that God does have the feeling towards me, like, if you should just know this thing. Like, you shouldn't experiment with yourself. You should just know this thing, and you're bad if you don't believe it, and I'm God, and you're Brittany. Like, yeah.
That's right. We think God's going to treat us like our parents treated us. And basically what they said is, well, I know the truth, shove it down your throat. You know, like, you're going to eat this truth, whether you like it or not, is really it's the same way they treated you with the vegetables, right? You're going to eat this vegetable no matter what, it's happening. And even if we're going to shove it down your throat. And that's really how we feel God's going to be with truth. And that's not how God is. God's very gentle with truth and he wants to have us go through the experience, because if you go through the experience, you'll be convinced afterwards. And God knows that. God's very confident in that once you go through the experiences, you know things. And so God's very gentle with the way God acts towards us. But the trouble is, oftentimes we refuse to engage God's experiments because we believe he's going to be like our mum and dad, which is so unfortunate. We believe he's going to force it down our throats. So we believe he's going to punish us if we don't do it and things like that. And none of those things are true. Brittany?
feel like it's such a gift knowing you guys, like, because it's been one of the most convincing things for me because of the way that you guys are. The way that you are with us is because you're connected with God or you want to be, and so
Yeah.
I feel like that tells me something about God.
God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the more a person receives God's love, the more they tell you about God, don't they?
Yeah, and that's been, yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you end up feeling more confident that God's a nice person.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah, that God's the best person actually. Yeah, the best being. Yeah. Lolly.
Through the experiment, we have to feel, and in feeling, we're expanding our capacity, which is what God wants us to do.
That's right.
And in that way, we also, if we go through the experiment of whether you're Jesus or not,
Yep.
we can take in that capacity of what you have inside you as well through that expansion, and therefore we can connect with God and then continue with that. And if we don't, we just go follow you.
Yeah.
Not gonna.
I would say though the primary experiments are firstly with your emotion to start working through your feelings, and the next experiment is receiving love from God. They are the two biggest experiments, and the issue as to who I am will help you. If you go through that, that'll help you greatly because it'll iron out a lot of doubt. You know, where you worry. People worry when they hear truth. You know, like worry whether it's actually true, whether it's actually going to work, and whether it's actually going to be beneficial, and whether it's actually going to be nice for them. And you know, they worry about a lot of things. And if you're not that worried about it, then you'll progress faster. Right? Simple as that. But you know, there are some things that are really important to accept first. Humility is the first thing to accept. The next thing to accept is truth, and the next thing to accept is love. Does that make sense? So the biggest experiments you can have are first with humility, then with truth, and then with love. And in fact, you won't even have the love experiment unless you receive some truth. And that truth has to hit your heart. So if you think about the tools, can you see the relationship? You've got to have some faith first that doing these things will work. And then you've got to get to the stage where you experiment with humility, you experiment with truth, and you experiment with love. Make sense? Yep. And treat it like an experiment. Like, I don't know, me and Connie, when we get together and we experiment with things, it's sort of like fascinating, isn't it? Like you sort of go, oh yeah, we could try this and we could try that, and you're not sort of going, oh, I don't want to do anything. You're more along you're enthusiastic, aren't you, with the experiments? And this is what you need to be with your experiment about your emotions. Enthusiastic about it. And the same goes with your experiment with truth and experiment with love, enthusiastic about it. And you'll find the more you treat it like a science project, and the more fascinated you become with it, the more rapidly you can absorb these truths that God can offer. And you can absorb them, but you have to go through the experiment to absorb every one of them. Yeah? Every one of them entails an experiment of some kind. Yeah. Hello?